So before we begin, please note that this webinar is being recorded. Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on ecological drought. My name is Crystal Stiles and I'm the Tribal Engagement Coordinator with the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences, or CERES, at the University of Colorado Boulder, as well as the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I'm also joined today by Molly Wolozin from CERES and NIDIS. This webinar is the final in a 6-part webinar series that seeks to raise awareness of ecological drought, share actions that strengthen ecosystem resilience, and mitigate the impacts of droughts, and highlight advancements in building tribal drought resilience and preserving natural and cultural resources. This series is co-organized and co-hosted by NIDIS and the USGS National Climate Adaptation Science Center, or NCASC. Information shared in the series will build on the 2021 National Ecological Drought webinar series, also co-organized by NIDIS and the National CASC. So before we begin, I want to provide a brief overview of NIDIS and the CASC for those that are not familiar with these programs. NIDIS was created by congressional law in 2006 with a mandate to help the nation prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS achieves that goal through the development of regional drought early warning systems, through efforts to improve drought monitoring, predictions, and forecasting, as well as support for effective drought planning and preparedness and assessing the impacts of drought.
All right, everybody, I'm sorry we are having some technical difficulties. I think that Crystal dropped off a little bit here, but let's go ahead and get started with our first presenter, and we'll loop you back in a little bit with a little bit more information about NIDIS before we wrap up completely.
Yes, I think we have Mike Derglo and Kyle Bosinski to present first. So if you guys want to share your screen.
All right, I'm sharing it now. Thanks. Can everybody see this presentation?
It looks great, and thank you everybody for bearing with us. Take it away, Kyle.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My voice is Kyle Bosinski. I'm the Director of Climate Extension for the Montana Climate Office. And with me here today is Mike Derglo from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And also on the call are a couple of my team members, Maureen McCarthy and Ann as well. Mike and I are going to sort of co-lead this, and it's about the Native Drought Resilience Project, which was started and funded as part of the 2022 Coping with Drought project, and brings together 4 really important organizations on the Confederated Salish and Kootenai on the Flathead Reservation, focused on CSKT actions for climate drought adaptation. Our partners on this were, of course, NIDIS, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, the Wilderness Society, and Salish Kootenai College, one of the tribal college and universities on the Flathead Reservation. And really, we start with the CSKT Lifeways Wheel, which links life and culture for climate adaptation. And so I'd like to invite Mike Derglo to talk a little bit about how this really frames what we were doing as part of the Native Drought Resilience Project.
Thanks, Kyle. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Good morning, everybody. My name is Stanley Grizzly Bear. That's my given name, and my Suyapi name is Mike Derglo, and I am the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes Climate Change Coordinator. Been working for the tribes about 42 years now, and just in the last 4 years, I've been given the opportunity to become full-time climate change coordinator. We were one of the first tribes back in like 2012, 2013 who developed a climate strategy. Actually, we were the third. I think Swinomish was first, Nez Perce was second. We worked on ours, finished it up in 2013. Part of that whole process was this Lifeways wheel that Kyle call it, I call it a model or Lifeways model or wheel. Kind of came to me in a dream, or I call it my awake vision. And what it represents really is the connectivity that all things have. And each one of these images that Ron Oden, a friend of mine, uh, drew out represents a sector in our plan. So you see water, people, infrastructure, wildlife, fisheries, air, and forestry, and so on, and people. So what that person in the middle represents is kind of us, me, you, all of us, and that all things around us are connected. And it's not really saying that we are at the center of everything, but it says more that we have a responsibility. And that's what I feel like, part of this work that we do. And thank you, Kyle, and Noah and NIDIS and everybody for helping us achieve some of the goals that we outlined in our plan. So I'll turn it back to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Mike. So this project, the Native Drought Project, was really focused on taking actions from the CSKT Climate Change Strategic Plan and implementing them, and that really stems from the 2022 Coping with Drought call. It was really important across our country, because instead of just funding the work of creating adaptation plans, strategic plans, drought plans, it actually provided funds to do some implementation. And so in this project, we did 5 different tasks. We focused on training the next generation through climate drought internships, developing data training materials for both practitioners and students across the Flathead Reservation. We developed a CSKT climate drought dashboard, deployed and supported weather, drought, and air quality monitoring networks, and developed story maps to communicate native drought resilience across this project. And I want to show you some of that output from 3 of those: our climate drought dashboards, our weather station and air quality monitoring networks, and then finally those story maps. The first thing was installing a weather station. What you see on the left here is the CSKT Bison Range weather station. The Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes regained ownership and operations of the Bison Range on the Flathead Reservation that had been taken over 100 years ago. And as part of that, they were working on a new range management plan, and needed some data about range conditions to support soil restoration, plant restoration, getting rid of invasives and the like. And so we partnered with the tribes to install a new weather station, top of the line, scientific grade, research grade weather station on the Bison Range. It includes all of your normal weather stuff: wind, temperature, precipitation, solar radiation, but also includes soil moisture down to a meter at 5 different levels that are reporting every 5 minutes to get a real-time picture of the amount of water that's available to plants in the soil, and also snow depth monitoring. All of these data are available on a custom dashboard that was created for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and is available at this URL. That gives both 5-minute data and hourly and daily aggregates of the data from this station. It's already proved really useful in being able to get that real-time picture and support some of these adaptation measures. It's also a highly visible weather station, and so working with Mike and some of the interpretive sign designers from the Flathead Reservation and the Bison Range, we created a series of signs that both tells the story of the CSKT climate change strategic plan, as well as describes why this weather station is sitting here in this view shed at the Bison Range. And talks about some of the changes and impacts that we're seeing from drought on the Bison Range. These are permanent installations on an interpretive trail, and you see them here with, is this Elise? I think I got a picture with somebody from NIDIS in it, which I'm real happy about. And then the weather station there in the background, and that's the Bison Range.
I think we were trying to talk her into going and petting the fluffy cows.
That's right. That's right. It's really important. The next thing that we did is we updated a dashboard that the Climate Office had been operating again with support from NIDIS. That is a drought dashboard for the Upper Missouri River Basin. We had already extended it to include the Columbia River Basin, which is where the Flathead Reservation is. But through this project, we not only added some more data sets that are more useful for assessing drought conditions across forested land, as much of western Montana and the Flathead Reservation is, but also allows easy access to local data that you can get to with just a quick little URL in order to really zoom in on specific areas. What's nice about this is that it not only serves the Flathead Reservation to bring these data to the fore and make them actionable immediately, but it actually we can do it for any of the tribal areas and in fact counties and other municipalities within the Upper Missouri and Colorado River or Columbia River Basin, excuse me. So this provides interactive daily to weekly and high resolution drought data for the Flathead Reservation, and is in fact the data set that gets used operationally by the state of Montana and by several other states in order to make their recommendations to the U.S. Drought Monitor, which in turn triggers disaster declarations and assistance for local areas. Something that we're really proud of that came out of the NOAA-NIDIS Coping with Drought grant, the Native Drought Project, was the expansion of Purple Air Monitor's low-cost air quality monitoring across the Flathead Reservation. Through this project, we were able to install indoor and outdoor air quality monitors at over 44 locations across the Flathead Reservation, including all of the elementary, middle, and high schools on the reservation, many tribal facilities, including all of the CSKT tribal health and fitness buildings across the reservation, 8 of them, and then also places like Tribal Council, Salish Kootenai College Extension, and the Bison Range Visitors Center. This we were able to turn into an interactive dashboard. Now it's really a simple dashboard. It's just a tabular view that shows current conditions across the entire reservation, but it allows people to, at a glance, see which areas are having unhealthy air quality challenges and help advise people in those places as to how to mitigate the impacts to themselves. The focus here was on public places, schools, health centers, and tribal government offices, and providing that local view of where wildfire, smoke, and air pollution are have the potential to impact human health. in our schools, educators are actually using these air quality data to teach environmental science and health curricula. And in fact, we had one teacher at one of the schools who's using the purple air monitor in her classroom in order to look at impacts beyond just wildfire smoke, to actually look at gas. Why am I forgetting the name of the gas? What's Bonnie White doing, Mike? Not argon gas.
Is it methane? No, it's not methane. It's
no, she was finding
radon.
Radon gas. Thank you so much. Radon gas emissions down in the basement of the school. The students were able to identify that health impact and get the school system to actually do mitigation. So it's really improving indoor air quality in these key public places across the Flathead Reservation. It also has been used to assess the quality of air filtration in tribal buildings across the reservation. And this is really important. We live in generally a cool area, and the way that we cool a lot of our buildings and homes is by opening windows. And so what we were seeing when we first started deploying these air quality monitors was that the indoor air quality, which people assume is going to be a more healthful space during high smoke events, were not actually good places to be. Sometimes that dirty air, that unhealthy air, was getting trapped inside our buildings, and that air that was being drawn in from the outside wasn't being adequately filtered. And so in several of our buildings, we've been able to identify that problem and work with building managers to install air filters in fresh air filtration systems in order to be able to make those indoor spaces more safe. Mike, is there anything you want to add about this? Mike started this program with an initial set of air quality monitors from Montana Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, another group that was really focused on schools.
Right, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, that's true. We started out with 7 monitors that we got from Montana Department of, I think it's Health and Human Services, DIFAS. Dr. Lori Young attended one of our Earth Day events and heard me speak about my concern for my grandson when he was out playing football, doing practices in the morning, and we couldn't see the mountain because of the smoke. So that's where it started, and I can't remember. That's about 5 years ago now, and like Kyle said, now we have 42. I was just looking at. I was just meeting with my intern Kenneth this morning, and we need 20 more. So if anybody has about $6,000 handy or extra, you can send us 20 more monitors. I want to put them in all the Head Start facilities and the senior citizen centers.
It'd be great. It's really proven to be a useful tool for identifying healthy air both inside and outside, and keeping track of what's going on in a pretty topographically complex area. And so we get little areas there in St. Ignatius or Mission, for example, where you can get pockets of pretty bad air quality when 5 kilometers away it can be clean air. And so you really do need that local view. Finally, this project funded the development of a series of story maps that took the Climate Change Strategic Plan, which is a large PDF, as many of these plans are, and made them interactive through maps, through interactive graphics, through connections to these other dashboards like we've been showing you, the air quality dashboard, the weather station dashboard, the drought dashboard, creating a living document that's been updated as the work has continued in all of these different sectors for the climate change strategic plan and drought adaptation on the Flathead Reservation. It provides direct access to many CSKT resources, including wildfire and other environmental concerns as well, and is available at climate.umt.edu/CSKT. I can't go into all of the different cool things that that are included within that story map series, but I will note that this story map, this series of story maps, are actually the first four of the sectors won the 2023 ArcGIS Story Maps competition focused on Native nations and traditional ecological knowledge. It was given a national level award as the best story map collection of the year to come out of tribal communities across the country. So we're really proud of that, and it got us a lot of focus on using these story maps as another dashboard for bringing these static plans to life and making them more actionable in communities. So just to close, here are some impacts and outcomes from this project. It expanded monitoring, including the Bison Range Station and over 40 purple air sensors that are delivering real-time data across the Flathead Reservation. It integrated into decision support tools for localized indicators that are enabling drought and wildfire planning across the reservation. CSKT departments are more equipped to make more risk-informed decisions, and we continue to roll out trainings and assistance in using these tools. One thing that we're proud of here in the Climate Office is that this is a pretty replicable model. We used open source tools for all of these dashboards, and they're all freely available on GitHub. So it really enables other Native nations to use these tools and adapt them to their own local areas and local needs for resilience planning. The community engagement component has been extensive through story maps and trainings that bridge Western science and Indigenous knowledge. And then finally, this had a huge workforce development component too that we haven't focused on in this presentation on dashboards, but it really has trained CSKT and SKC interns and given them hands-on experience with drought assessment and climate adaptation planning. If you have any questions, you're welcome to send me an email, kyle.basinski@umontana.edu, and I'll probably put you in touch with Mike and others for specific questions about Flathead Reservation climate adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle and Mike, and apologies earlier for the disruption with my internet. So I did not get a chance to read Mike and Kyle's bios, so I'd like to do that really quickly. So Mike serves as the Tribal Historic Preservation Department Head of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes and has been a leader in climate change work for nearly a decade. He facilitated the development of a Flathead Reservation climate change strategic plan for the CSKT. And Kyle is the Director of Climate Extension for the Montana Climate Office and an Assistant Research Professor in the Department of Society and Conservation at the University of Montana. Kyle serves users of climate data and information in Montana, including outreach supporting agriculture, forestry, recreation, and urban and rural resilience planning. So with that, I'm going to go back to where I left off. So let me just take a moment to share my screen. Okay, so I will start this discussion again. NIDIS was created by congressional law in 2006 with a mandate to help the nation prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS achieves that goal through the development of regional drought early warning systems, through efforts to improve drought monitoring, predictions, and forecasting, as well as support for effective drought planning and preparedness and assessing the impacts of drought. All of our work is done in collaboration with a wide range of partners at all levels. I encourage you to explore the U.S. Drought portal at drought.gov, which is the U.S. government's authoritative drought information website, including information on ecological drought and our work with tribal partners, which is guided by our tribal engagement strategy. The Climate Adaptation Science Centers consist of 1 national and 9 regional centers that cover the United States, the U.S. Caribbean, and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. The CASCs bring together scientists and natural and cultural resource managers united under a common goal of helping fish, wildlife, land, water, and people adapt to a changing climate. The CASCs use an actionable science model to generate climate science and tools to help partners develop adaptation strategies that meet on-the-ground needs. So transitioning back to the webinar, so since 2007, NIDIS has funded over 70 innovative and applied drought research projects through the Coping with Drought competitive grant program. So today's webinar, Drought Dashboards to Improve Drought Monitoring, Inform Tribal Resilience, and Preserve Ecological and Cultural Resources, highlights the outcomes of 3 projects which were funded in FY22. Okay, so I will move on and talk about the second and third presentations briefly. Our second presentation, Developing a Drought Early Warning System and Indices for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, will feature Lindsay Lewis. Lindsay is an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, where she works within the Department of Natural Resources Water Resources Program. She is also a graduate student at Oregon State University, pursuing a master's degree in natural resources with a specialization in water conflict management and transformation. Her work focuses on groundwater governance, drought resilience, science communication, and the integration of indigenous knowledge and First Foods perspectives into water resource management and decision making. Our final presentation is Let's Get Ready, Collaborative Climate Change and Drought Response Monitoring and Implementation. Our speakers will be Judson Fisher and Daniel Sarna-Wojcicki. Judson has been the GIS coordinator for the Karuk tribe for the last 2 years. He has an MS in forestry from Cal Poly Humboldt and is passionate about clean data and documentation. Daniel works with the Karuk tribe wildlife program as a research and policy consultant. He has been working with the Karuk tribe Department of Natural Resources since 2009 on projects related to watershed restoration, food sovereignty, climate resilience, and wildlife ecology. So throughout the webinar, all participants are muted. Please enter your questions anytime using Slido and WebEx. If you're using WebEx in the browser, click the Apps button on the bottom right of your screen, type in your questions, and hit send. If you're using the WebEx app, you'll see this option in the bottom right of your screen. Identify when possible if your question is for a specific speaker. We will address questions after all presentations are completed and if we have time. So let's get started with our now second speaker, Lindsay, if you'd like to share your screen.
Okay, did it come up?
It looks great and we can hear you. Thanks, Lindsay.
Okay, Tatsmewe everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Lindsay Lewis and I work with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation Water Resource Program. Today I'm going to share some of the work we've done developing the C2IR Drought Early Warning System Dashboard, or C2IR DEWS Dashboard. And more importantly, some of the outcomes, lessons learned, and approaches that may be useful for others working in drought resilience, ecological monitoring, and communication. This project was supported through the National Integrated Drought Information System Fiscal Year 22 Building Tribal Drought Resilience Program, and focused on improving ecological drought awareness, communication, and decision support for the Umatilla Indian Reservation. When many people think about drought, they think primarily about water supply or precipitation deficits, but ecological drought is broader than that. Ecological drought affects rivers, groundwater systems, fish habitat, vegetation, wildlife seasonal timing, and ultimately the relationships between ecosystems and communities. From a tribal perspective, drought is often experienced through impacts to our first foods and culturally important resources. changes in water availability and temperature can affect salmon migration, stream conditions, root and berry gathering areas, wildlife habitat, and overall ecosystem function. These impacts are interconnected and cumulative. We recognized early on that drought communication needed to be more ecologically and culturally relevant, especially for communities whose livelihoods, stewardship practices, and cultural traditions remain closely tied to environmental conditions. As we started evaluating available drought information, we realized there was a gap between the information that existed and the information that was actually useful for our community's awareness and communication. A lot of drought information was fragmented across different agencies, websites, and monitoring systems. It was often highly technical and difficult to quickly interpret or apply to the conditions and work being done on the ground. At the same time, ecological impacts don't occur in isolation. Low stream flow, warming water temperatures, declining groundwater conditions, wildfire risk, and habitat stress are all connected. We wanted to create a system that brought those pieces together into a more accessible and integrated format that could support communication, awareness, and preparedness. The goal of this project was not simply to build a dashboard. We wanted to improve drought awareness and communication in a way that was meaningful and usable for our community and natural resource programs. Some of the major goals included centralizing drought and environmental monitoring information, improving accessibility and interpretation, supporting ecological awareness and preparedness, improving communication across programs and with the community, and incorporating First Foods perspectives into drought monitoring and resilience efforts. We also wanted to create something flexible and adaptable that could continue evolving over time. The result was the C2IR DEWS dashboard, which focuses on 4 main areas of emphasis. The first area is learning more about drought and ecological drought impacts. The second is First Foods monitoring, which helps show our community the indicators and conditions we use within the Department of Natural Resources to monitor and help protect first foods. The third area is our share information section. This is where we hear directly from our community in real time about the conditions they are observing while engaging with first foods, whether that be hunting, fishing, gathering, or other activities on the landscape. Finally, we brought together information from federal and state agencies to provide accessible, easy to read current conditions and outlook information in one centralized location. One of the most important aspects of the dashboard is that it was designed not only as a technical monitoring tool, but also as a communication tool. We intentionally focused on accessibility, plain language, visual interpretation, and ecological relevance so users could better understand changing conditions and emerging drought impacts. One of the biggest outcomes from this project was improving accessibility to drought and environmental information. By centralizing the information into one platform, we made it easier for resource managers, leadership, and community members to access and interpret changing environmental conditions. Another important outcome was increasing ecological awareness. The dashboard helped connect drought conditions to ecological impacts and first foods in a more visible and understandable way. The project also strengthened communication across programs and helped improve shared awareness around changing conditions, hazards, and ecological stressors. We also found that integrating information into one centralized location improved overall usability and helped support more timely awareness and preparedness. Finally, incorporating community observations created an opportunity for local knowledge and lived experiences to contribute to drought awareness and ecological monitoring. One of the biggest lessons we learned throughout this project is that first foods do not always fit neatly in traditional drought metrics. The ecological conditions affecting first foods can vary significantly across landscapes, seasons, species, biological functions, and sensitivities to stress. In many cases, drought is also only one of several interacting environmental stressors affecting ecosystem health and culturally important resources. That complexity reinforced the importance of integrating multiple information systems and perspectives rather than relying on a single indicator or metric. We also learned that community observations and local knowledge are incredibly valuable for strengthening environmental awareness. As natural resource staff, we cannot be everywhere at all times across the landscape. Community members are often observing changing conditions firsthand while hunting, fishing, gathering, and interacting with first foods across the reservation. Another important lesson was balancing complexity with usability. Environmental monitoring generates enormous amounts of information, but translating that information into something accessible, understandable, and useful for broader audiences is challenging. Finally, we learned that iterative development is essential. The dashboard improved significantly through collaboration, feedback, testing, and continual refinement over time. One thing we hope others can take away from this project is the effective drought tools are not only technical products, they are also communication tools. One approach that worked well for us was starting with user needs rather than simply building around available data. We tried to focus on how people would actually access, interpret, and use information in real-world situations. We also found it was important to integrate communication into the design process early. Accessibility, plain language, and visual interpretation significantly improved usability and engagement. Another important takeaway was the value of connecting drought information to the ecological impacts people recognize and experience directly. Linking conditions to ecosystems, habitat, and first foods helped make the information more meaningful and understandable. We also learned that incorporating community observations and local knowledge can significantly strengthen environmental awareness and help expand understanding of changing conditions across the landscape. Finally, collaboration and development were essential throughout the process. Feedback, testing, and cross-program coordination helped improve the dashboard significantly. Moving forward, this work will continue evolving as conditions, monitoring needs, and community priorities change over time. Some important future directions include continuing to expand ecological monitoring and improving the indicators used to better understand drought impacts across ecosystems and first foods. We also hope to continue improving accessibility and usability so environmental information remains understandable and useful for a broad range of users and audiences. Another important priority is continuing to strengthen community engagement and observations because local knowledge and lived experiences provide valuable insight into changing environmental conditions occurring across the landscape. The dashboard also supports broader adaptive drought preparedness and resilience efforts by helping improve awareness, communication, and ecological understanding. Finally, continued collaboration across programs, agencies, and communities will remain essential as we continue refining and improving this work over time. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to share this work. It has been a privilege. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Lindsay. We will take questions after all the presentations are completed. So now let's hear from our third and final speakers, Judson and Daniel.
Great, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much to our co-presenters for their important work and their great presentations. Thanks to NOAA for supporting these projects and hosting this webinar. I'm Dan Sarnov-Wojcicki. I'm working as a research and policy consultant for the Karuk Wildlife Program. I'm with Judson Fisher today, the GIS coordinator for the Karuk Department of Natural Resources. And Judd and I will be presenting on behalf of our team today. So I just want, before we get started, want to thank our colleagues, Asia Conrad, Annalisa Tripp, Colleen Rosier, and Sean Bork, who really led this project. Judd, are you able to share your slides? I just saw them before, but now they've disappeared. There it is. So our project is called Shimi Nukari Hihi, which means let's get ready in Karuk, and it focuses on collaborative climate change and drought response monitoring in Karuk Aboriginal lands and communities. The Karuk tribe is a federally recognized tribe. It has the second largest membership in California. Karuk Aboriginal territories in the middle of the Klamath Basin in Northern California, covers around a little over 1 million acres across Humboldt, Siskiyou, and Del Norte counties. The Karuk tribe is really on the forefront of restoring watersheds and ecosystems in their Aboriginal territory, revitalizing cultural resources and bringing beneficial fire back to the land. So our project aims to combine Indigenous and Western science approaches to monitoring drought impacts and building resilience to drought and other climate-related stressors. It's really centered around 4 major activities: developing a GIS database and data management system for drought resilience, expanding ecological monitoring plots and cultural plant surveys across tribal lands, also establishing a Karuk Indigenous Stewardship Network, and training tribal managers and tribal youth in GIS and data management. Ultimately, the goal is to improve early drought detection and adaptive management, to engage Karuk tribal staff from different programs and tribal community members in monitoring and ongoing stewardship of culturally significant places, and to ultimately enhance social and ecological resilience in Karuk tribal lands and communities. So now I'll pass it over to Judd to talk about data sovereignty in the drought portal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
So one of the things we did was develop the PICYAV climate data portal, and we implemented this as an ArcGIS hub application. It's hosted on-premise in our ArcGIS enterprise deployment. And the main work that was involved here was just sourcing and curating publicly available climate data and providing it in a centralized place where it's easily findable alongside our locally produced and collected ecological data that Dan's going to talk more about in a little bit. This setup allows, for instance, to view our ACA plots in the context of regional drought indicators. The hub site also allows us to link to other sources of climate data, as well as integrate with ongoing climate change projects that the Karuk tribe is involved with and spearheading. One of the tools that we found really useful was this climate toolbox, tribal climate tool. It's really easy to use, and most of the people we presented it to found it really helpful and accessible. Another aspect of what we did was we purchased a new server to host our ArcGIS enterprise deployment and our climate portal. This turned out to be a long, winding, and complicated task. It started out with a government shutdown that made it difficult for us to do a necessary budget adjustment. And then there was, we have an internal, somewhat lengthy council review process that just wasn't really compatible with the super short-term quotes we were getting to buy systems with prices changing rapidly. So this resulted in a couple of failed or missed attempts where we even got as far as submitting orders, and those orders then got canceled and prices came back and were doubled. So our solution to this problem relied on leaning on some large language models and working with refurbished hardware vendors. This turned out to be an enlightening and also fairly efficient process. We quickly got up to speed on exactly what it was that we were needing, and we're able to identify and send out quotes to a range of reputable vendors. And the result was we were able to get our new server purchased, and I think it's going to easily serve us for the next 5+ years. A third aspect that we worked on was working on supporting our Indigenous data sovereignty, data governance protocols and planning. This portion started out with the goals of providing a sort of like far-reaching data governance policy. It turned out that that this scope was too large for us to start with, that we needed to spend more time working with tribal council and our department direction to identify a more reasonable scope to start with. We realized that we needed to start by focusing on protocols and standard operating procedures, as the way that it was working currently was every program just sort of had an ad hoc and different approach to how they did their data sharing with external partners. So this work is ongoing, but we've gotten a lot closer to developing a standard operating procedure and set of best practices for data sharing, and hope to move towards a more comprehensive data governance plan as a result of this work. So I'll pass it back over now to Dan to talk about the ACA plots data collection.
Okay, thanks, Judd. So another objective in this project aimed to refine and expand the Kaduk Agroecosystem Condition Assessment, or ACA. This assessment is a tool for studying cultural plant species and their response to restoration treatments or disturbances and long-term climate variability. It was developed through a partnership between the Kaduk tribe and UC Berkeley, led by Jennifer Sauerwein at UC Berkeley and Frank Lake at US Forest Service, Lisa and Leif Hillman at Kaduk Tribe, Vicki Preston and Kathy McCovey also at Kaduk Tribe, and others. And it combines traditional agroforestry methods like Firemon module, releve surveys, plant surveys, and transects and stand exams, as well as remote sensing and cultural practitioner surveys of cultural plant health and use quality. And it focuses on longer term use, land use and ecological change research as well. Next slide, please, Judd. And it's showing a kind of a weird view of, there we go. It focuses on these 21 species, focal species, through 1 acre size plots and smaller patches established around these cultural focal species. These species were chosen by tribal staff and cultural practitioners as culturally and ecologically significant indicators that represent different habitat types and ranges of cultural use species. So through this project, we really streamlined our data collection and management systems. We set up 3 additional plots and some additional patches and conducted seasonal monitoring at each of the new plots as well as the older plots and patches. And for the different sites, we're also conducting long-term land use and ecological change research. Next slide, please. Using historical records, aerial images, remote sensing data, and in some cases, dendrochronology and other fire history records. And this helps us look at longer-term ecological change and responses to different types of disturbances, fires, floods, restoration projects, and also helps us plan watershed and ecosystem restoration projects as well in these sites. For example, next slide, please. Historical aerials are currently being used to help plan meadow or Tishamnahish restoration projects in Karuk lands. Meadows are important habitats. They locally and regionally, they support lots of cultural use plant species like geophytes, irises, grasses, and basket tree materials. And they're also important ecologically for ungulates, deer and elk, as well as bird species and other species like mountain beaver. And meadows have historically been encroached over the last century due to fire suppression and timber production. So restoring them is really a priority from an ecological and cultural perspective, but it's also important hydrologically. The encroachment of conifers and woody vegetation causes waterways and wet meadows and dry meadows to incise from multiple shallow channels with wide floodplains to single, deeper, and often ephemeral channels that are disconnected from their floodplains. And this results in falling groundwater tables. So meadows are also important hydrologically and as source areas for many creeks locally. They help infiltrate groundwater and feed creeks late into the dry season. So meadows can be really important in terms of watershed restoration and drought resilience. They're also important fire breaks and fire control features. So the tribe is really prioritizing meadows as habitat feature for restoration and using historical aerials and land use records and local knowledge to prioritize sites for restoration. Claire McCoy recently finished her master's project at Berkeley with the tribe on mapping historical meadows and prioritizing different restoration projects. And Cleo Wolfley-Hazard and John Oberholzer at the tribe are looking at the hydrologic and geomorphologic impacts of restoring meadows, looking at how meadow restoration impacts late season flows and hydrology and temperature. So this is really an important emerging and future area for enhancing drought resilience for the tribe and for promoting fire resilience and supporting ecocultural revitalization going forward. Next slide, please. So ultimately, the agroecosystem condition assessment plots and patches can help us study the impacts of restoration projects and different disturbances and stressors such as wildfires or droughts or floods on vegetation and habitats, and they can support drought resilience and long-term social and ecological resilience, yes, by gathering quantitative and qualitative data, but also mainly just by supporting ongoing connections between people and place, as represented in this figure here from a paper that's currently under review and hopefully will be published soon. Indigenous cultural agroecosystem resilience is really the result of complex interactions and ongoing relationships between Indigenous community members and ecosystem conditions through place-based cultural practices. So getting families and tribal staff from different programs and youth groups together at these places across the landscape to study these places and restore them really helps build agroecosystem resilience. The folks who care about these places will be there taking care of them for the long haul, whether it's part of their official job or if there's a grant to support it or not. And they're really invested in these places and want to take care of them for many generations into the future. So they're visiting these places regularly with their families throughout the seasons and over the years, and they really know these places. They're stewarding particular cultural use species and making recommendations about how to manage them and restore habitat for different plant species, ungulates or avian species, or to do post-fire restoration in certain areas that have burned and wildfires. So another critical, next slide, please, area that we're working on in terms of building resilience is supporting tribal youth and developing K through 12 curriculum and lesson plans, leading field trips to some of these plots and areas, providing internships to tribal youth over the summer at Department of Natural Resources, and getting the next generation of land stewards really plugged into natural resources work and engaged, and also providing future career opportunities and training for them. Lots of challenges that I'm sure lots of folks are facing. related to recruiting and maintaining tribal staff. There's lots of turnover at the Natural Resources Department. There's challenges related to workforce housing and lack of office space, infrastructure challenges like the ones that Judd mentioned, and of course, finding ongoing funding to support tribal staff and natural resources programs right now is difficult. So finding solutions to these upstream challenges, I think, will go a long way in supporting social and ecological resilience over the long term. Similarly, areas like getting land back, the tribe is in the process of doing this through purchasing land, but also through congressional actions like the Kadamine and Amakyaram Sacred Lands Act in 2023. Also plenty of regulatory and legal challenges around storing and managing land. Tribe is continuing to work with U.S. Forest Service to co-steward forests in their Aboriginal territory, and also with federal and state agencies around Endangered Species Act and NEPA processes, working on finding ways to better represent tribal knowledge and values and support tribal sovereignty in those processes as well. So here's some resources that came out of this work on this slide here. Happy to follow up if there are any questions. Thanks. I'll pass it back to Judd for some reflections on data sovereignty.
And I know that we're just over time, so I'll make this short. The ideas of hosting data locally on servers, data governance policies, and collecting locally grounded, indigenous knowledge grounded climate and drought monitoring data are all interrelated. And I think what we found is that if you're going to buy a server during an AI boom, going with refurbished hardware is a good bet. And that if we're going to design a data governance policy, it's good to plan for a long haul and start out with adequate scoping. And the last thought that I had was that while we have been hosting our data on our local servers, whereas we have relatively few data sets, the number of data sets available publicly is a lot greater. And it may make sense, instead of trying to bring all those data sets to our local server, to put our data sets on cloud, privately shared cloud data servers was something we'll consider for the future. So thank you very much for hearing our presentation, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Justin and Daniel. Just getting my slides up here again. Okay, we do have a couple of questions in the queue. I know that we're just about at time. We will try to get to a couple of those. We'll mention that this has been recorded, so if you need to hop off now, we will capture the Q&A session. Okay, thanks again to all of the speakers for their excellent presentations. Let me go ahead and start asking a couple of questions here. So the first question, this is for Mike and Kyle from Chris Moreno. Have there been any collaborations with Canada on working with air quality concerns? It seems like many of the smoke impacts going forward will continue crossing borders, and with Montana's proximity to Alberta and Canada, it would benefit both countries to work together on either funding assistance or other support.
Kinda, sorta. I'm the co-chair on the CMP, the Crown Managers Partnership, and the Crown of the Continent is, of course, if you know the area, it includes Canada. So I work with several tribes and First Nations up there. And in fact, we are planning a workshop coming up here shortly, and which includes them. And that's something I will talk about in that workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The next question is for Lindsay. Under the lessons learned, what type of community observations were submitted? Were there meetings to collect feedback or through built relationships? Or did they use the Seymour website or something similar?
Hi, yeah, great question. So we're using a Survey 123 through the ArcGIS Esri platform. And as surveys come in from our community, we're compiling them, and at the end of the year, we'll put together a report. Our traction or actual surveys received right now is still relatively low as we're going into this season of community outreach and engagement.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I would love to ask this question as long as all three of you can keep it very short answers, but this is such a great question to all the panelists. I'm curious to hear about how these dashboards have led to concrete resilience planning decisions. Judson or Daniel, would you want to start with that one?
Sure, I can say that there are a couple of the plots that we're studying and have used the dashboard to collate and pull together data on both previous land use as well as our last few years of surveys, current conditions, and interviews with tribal staff and cultural practitioners about how to restore those areas have been put into practice. There was also a wildfire that burned a couple of different wildfires that burned a couple of different plots. And so fire recovery and restoration recommendations from those plots and using the drought dashboard were used to inform restoration treatments in those particular plots. And also to study the long-term impacts post-treatment in those areas as vegetation starts to come back. So I think that's one example. And then also, as I mentioned, just planning and prioritizing meadow restoration treatments.
Thank you, Daniel. Kyle or Mike on that question?
Go ahead, Kyle. The last one.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that I think, I mean, you can speak to this better, but the air quality monitoring has really been impactful across the Flathead Reservation, and it led to conversations for this upcoming season where that dashboard and the data that are coming out of those purple air monitors is being integrated into an early warning system to literally get a call out or a mass text out to all of these building managers. Oh, it's time to close your clean air intakes from outside, or make sure that you've got your filters going, make sure that your doors are being shut as opposed to just popping them open. Those sort of mass and rapid response is part of the plan for this coming summer. So that's just one small way. Mike, any others on your end?
Well, it helped us in a process of developing 3 safe clean air centers with the help of Montana DIFAS, the Department of Health and Human Services. We have now established or identified 3 centers that we want to work with that are safe centers for air quality. And that all of those purple air monitors helped us do that. So continual monitoring and like Kyle said, cleaning the filters or changing them or closing some air intakes.
Thank you, Mike and Kyle. Lindsay?
Yeah, I think I don't know that I can say that we've been able to see it change decision making just yet, but I have seen our management teams refer to our dashboard to find information. And the second, and I think most important, is that line of communication directly to our community. In late March, our county declared, as many we've seen across the state of Oregon, are declaring a state of drought. And Umatilla County, March, I guess it was beginning of March, declared drought, and we were able to get information out to our community. We were able to give them tips and pointers on conserving water during drought. And so, yeah, just that line of communication.
Thank you, Lindsay. If we did not get to your question, we will certainly get you in touch with the presenters after the webinar. Okay, so just to wrap up, if you are interested in receiving communications from NIDIS about events such as these, the latest drought conditions in your area, or about work that of our partners, please follow this QR code or check out the link in the chat to sign up for our Dry Times newsletter, our tribal engagement news, or our regional dues communications. So just one last thank you to all of our speakers today, Mike, Kyle, Lindsay, Judson, and Daniel. And on behalf of the NIDIS and National CASC program, thanks to all of you who decided to spend an hour of your day with us.